The sky burned like an angry wound over the shattered colonies of Zenther Prime. What had started as a diplomatic expedition had turned into a silent massacre. No one knew who fired the first shot, but once it echoed, it was too late to stop. Anything. Human ships rained down from orbit. Alien defenses screamed awake. Smoke and fire danced between glass towers that had once welcomed trade and peace. Sergeant Elias, Ward, stood behind a barricade of melted stone, his uniform torn and ash-coated. The translator chip in his ear buzzed with static, useless against the chaos. His team was gone. Only silence answered his calls. He wasn't supposed to be here anymore. The last shuttle had left an hour ago. But he had stayed, not for orders, not for duty. For her. He remembered the first time he saw her. She didn't speak. She didn't even try, but her eyes held entire galaxies. Her name was something his mouth couldn't pronounce, but in his mind, he called her Liari. She was part of the council, young for her kind, and entirely out of place among cold diplomats and stone-faced warriors. Elias had seen her during a treaty session, standing beside the older representatives with her, eyes wide and full of questions. She never spoke, but she watched. And when she looked at him, it was like time skipped. No translator could explain that kind of moment. Something deep and ancient had passed between them. Something not shaped by words. Now, crouched in the rubble of a dying city, Elias could feel that same connection pulling him forward. Somewhere inside this hell, she was still alive. He didn't know how he knew. He just did. The ground shook beneath his boots. Distant plasma fire lit up the skyline like lightning trapped in slow motion. He moved quickly, slipping through ruined corridors and broken domes. The alien city had once glowed with peaceful light and soft colors. Now it was all sharp shadows and boiling air. His weapon hummed at his side, but he hoped he wouldn't have to use it. Hope was rare now. Most had already lost it. He reached what used to be a communication tower. Its top had collapsed, but parts of the inner structure still stood. That's when he heard it, a voice. Not shouting, not calling for help, humming, a strange, lilting melody that didn't match the destruction around it. Soft, gentle, out of place. Elias moved carefully toward the sound. Every step echoed. Every breath felt like a gamble. And then he saw her. Liari, sitting in a corner of broken crystal walls, her face streaked with dust, her hair tangled with smoke. But her eyes were still stars. She looked at him, and the humming stopped. Her lips parted, but no sound came. She didn't run. She didn't smile. She just stared, like he was something unreal. Then, slowly she reached out a hand. Not toward his face, not toward his weapon, but toward his chest. Right where his heart beat the loudest. He knelt beside her, speaking softly. She didn't understand the words, but she seemed to understand the tone. She tilted her head like a curious bird, listening to his broken sentences. He repeated his name 3 times. Finally she pointed at herself. Liari, he guessed. She blinked once. Then not a dot. For the first time she smiled. He laughed. Not because anything was funny. Because something inside him felt like it had survived. Because even in this shattered world, something beautiful still dared to exist. He reached into his pack and offered her water. She took it carefully, as if it were sacred. She drank slowly, then offered it back with both hands. A silent gesture of respect. They didn't speak after that. They didn't need to, not yet. Her eyes told him more than any sentence ever could. But Elias knew the silence wouldn't last. The war was still raging. Others would come. And not everyone would pause just because someone's eyes sparkled with mystery. He looked around. This place wasn't safe. They had to move, he pointed to the broken hallway behind him and mimed walking. She hesitated, then stood. Her movements were graceful, almost too light for someone surrounded by death. She followed him without Questioned as they walked through firelit ruins and twisted steel. He kept thinking about what it meant to understand someone without words. What kind of connection worked deeper than language? And why, even in a place torn by war, two people from different worlds could choose to walk side by side. Asterisk smoke curled through the shattered corridors like a living thing. It clung to Elias's skin and crept into his lungs with every breath. Still he pushed forward. Beside him, Liari moved like a shadow. She didn't cough. She didn't flinch. She simply followed, eyes wide and glowing in the half-light of the ruined halls. They passed the broken remains of what must have once been a garden. Strange plants lay wilted and blackened, their glass petals shattered. A wind stirred the ash. Somewhere in the distance, a building collapsed with a soft groan. Neither of them spoke. Elias knew their silence was not empty. Every step, every glance carried more meaning than words ever could. He would have given anything to understand her thoughts. To ask if she was scared, if she trusted him, if she believed. There was still hope for either of them. The ruins twisted into a narrow tunnel, half collapsed and glowing with dim red lights. Liari paused and placed a hand against the wall. Symbols glowed beneath her fingers like the language of light itself. Elias stopped, watching in awe. She turned to him and gestured. He didn't need a translator to understand. Danger lay ahead. Something was coming. Something that didn't care about peace or surrender. He nodded once and raised his weapon. She didn't protest. Instead, she moved past him, faster now, leading the way like she'd walked this path 100 times. The tunnel opened into a wide chamber, filled with floating shards of crystal and a hum that made Elias's bones ache. At the center stood a creature Elias had never seen before. It was not Xantharian, not human. It shimmered with oily colors and hissed like steam. Its eyes snapped toward them. Liari didn't wait. She stepped forward, her fingers tracing symbols into the air, glowing with energy. The creature roared without sound. Elias raised his weapon, but something in Liari's stance held him back. She wasn't afraid. She was speaking, not with words. With light, with movement. Her language wasn't made for ears. It was made for those who watched with their hearts. The creature shifted, vibrating with tension. Then slowly, it backed away. The hum faded. The light dimmed. Liari lowered her hands. Her body trembled, but her face remained calm. She turned to Elias and gave him the smallest nod. He couldn't believe what he had just seen. She had faced a nightmare and made it retreat with nothing but her presence. She had spoken without sound and won a battle no weapon could have. They moved on, deeper into the ruins. With every step, Elias felt something change. He wasn't just surviving anymore. He was learning. Watching the way Liari moved, the way she used silence like a blade, he began to mimic her pace, to breathe when she breathed, to watch what she watched. She stopped again, this time at a circular door sealed with alien script. Elias stepped forward, but she held up a hand. Then she pressed her palm to a glowing panel. The door shuttered and slowly opened. Inside was a small chamber untouched by war. Soft lights glowed from the walls. A strange bed floated in the air. This must have been her room. Her sanctuary. She looked at him, unsure if he should follow. He stepped inside without hesitation. She sat cross-legged in the center and gestured for him to do the same. When he did, she pulled out a smooth crystal from the floor. It shimmered in her hand. Then, she touched it to her forehead and held it out to him. He didn't understand, but he trusted her. He took the crystal and pressed it gently to his own forehead. His mind exploded with light, images, feelings, not words but dreams, her memories. Him, he saw himself through her eyes. A strange creature with soft eyes and steady hands. He saw how she had watched him from across council chambers, how she had noticed the way he treated others, how she had chosen him long before he even knew her name. Tears filled his eyes. Not from pain, but from something deeper. Connection, understanding. She hadn't just seen him. She had felt him, trusted him. Even when war broke everything, she had believed in him. When the crystal dimmed, he opened his eyes. She was watching him closely. He didn't know what to say. So he reached out and gently touched her hand. She didn't pull away. She only smiled. The quiet inside Liari's sanctuary did not last long. A rumble echoed from above, shaking dust from the ceiling. Something had entered the building. Elias rose instantly, weapon drawn. Liari stood too, her eyes flashing with silent warning. This time, it wasn't a creature of light or dreams. It was soldiers. Through the cracked walls, Elias spotted movement. Heavy boots, metal armor, human uniforms, his own kind. But not friends. These were scavengers. Men who'd stayed behind to loot, not to rescue. And if they found her, they would not ask questions. He pulled Liari into the shadows, signaling for her to stay low. Her eyes were wide, not with fear, but with concern for him. She understood the danger, even if she didn't understand the words. Elias crept forward, positioning himself behind a half-collapsed column. He could hear voices now. Check that room. Could be tech in there worth credits. Don't waste time talking to survivors. The words made Elias's jaw clench. They were close, too close. Liari's room had no door now, no protection. She reached out and touched Elias's shoulder, gently pulling him back. Then she pointed to a panel behind her bed. A secret passage. He helped her push it open, just as the first soldier entered. The man didn't see them slip into the narrow tunnel. The wall slid shut behind them with barely a sound. Darkness swallowed them, but Liari pressed her hand to the wall, and faint lights sparked to life like fireflies. They moved quickly through the winding corridor. The air grew warmer, charged with soft pulses of energy. This passage wasn't for escape. It was ancient, sacred. Elias could feel it in his bones. The deeper they went, the less it felt like the war could reach them. Liari slowed near a fork in the path. She placed both palms on the wall and whispered something that wasn't a word. A map lit up before them, alive with shifting lines and glowing dots. She studied it, then pointed toward the left tunnel. Elias nodded without hesitation. The tunnel opened into a vast underground dome. It stretched wider than any human structure Elias had ever seen. Trees shimmered with silver leaves. Pools of glowing liquid reflected the ceiling like mirrors. This place was untouched, pure, and at its center stood a monument of crystal and light. Liari approached it with slow, reverent steps. Elias followed, unsure what they had found. She placed her hand on the monument and closed her eyes. The crystal lit up, projecting images into the air. A history, her people's memory. Their songs and visions made solid by light. Elias watched as a story unfolded. Peaceful times, then war, then fire raining from the sky. But always, in every memory, two figures appeared, one alien, one human, standing side by side. It was not just a prophecy. It was a cycle. A hope passed down through generations. Liari turned to him and placed her hand over her heart. Then she pointed to him and did the same. Elias understood. She was telling him that he wasn't just someone who stayed. He was someone meant to be here. Someone chosen long before he knew it. He stepped closer and placed his hand beside hers. On the crystal, more images poured out, this time of him. Not just recent memories, but things only he had seen. His childhood, his home, his mother's smile, his first mission. Somehow the crystal had reached into his soul. She gasped softly, seeing his memories. Tears welled in her eyes. Not from sadness, but from recognition. She saw him now. All of him, and she did not turn away. They stood there in silence, two hearts speaking in ways no translator could match. No words were needed when dreams and memories flowed between them like rivers of light. Suddenly, the crystal flickered. A warning pulse. Someone had breached the tunnel above. The soldiers had found the hidden path. They had minutes. Maybe less. Elias looked at Liari, heart racing. She nodded once. She was ready. Together, they turned and ran back toward the dome's far edge, where another tunnel waited. Whatever lay beyond it, they would face it together. The tunnel curved sharply downward, colder with every step. The lights embedded in the walls grew dimmer. Elias gripped his weapon tightly, listening for footsteps behind them. Liari moved. Ahead without fear. Her focus was steady. She knew this path. He trusted her. Up above, the sounds of pursuit echoed faintly. Metal boots on crystal, voices shouting orders. The scavenger soldiers were not far, but this tunnel was different. It didn't just lead away. It led somewhere the soldiers would never expect. They reached a gate of living roots and smooth stone. It pulsed faintly, like a sleeping heart. Liari approached and knelt before it, placing her hands on the ground. Elias stepped back, unsure. The gate responded to her touch, opening in silence. What waited beyond was breathtaking. A cavern of starlight, not artificial light, real stars. A fragment of open sky hidden deep underground. Above them, the ceiling shimmered like space had been folded into the earth. Floating stones orbited slowly, glowing with ancient energy. Liari stepped inside first. Elias followed, eyes wide. In the center of the chamber stood a ring of monoliths, each carved with symbols he couldn't read, each humming with quiet power. Liari approached the tallest one and touched it with both hands. The room changed. Colors burst in the air like soft fireworks. Not painful or blinding, warm, gentle. They danced between the monoliths and formed a pattern, a message, a beacon. Elias watched as Liari moved through the lights, tracing paths with her fingers. She was speaking, not to him, to something greater. Her people had left something here, a last gift, a last call. He didn't understand the details, but he felt the meaning. If these soldiers destroyed her, they would destroy something older than war. Elias stepped forward and joined her. He raised both hands, unsure what to do. Liari looked at him and smiled. Then she guided his hands to the symbols carved into the stone. The moment he touched them, images raced through his mind. He saw Liari as a child, watching the stars with her mother. He saw the first time she had seen a human on the Intergalactic screen. He saw her curiosity grow into fascination, and then into something deeper. A belief that there was more than war between their kinds. Then the vision changed. He saw himself, not in armor, not with a weapon, but standing beside her. No battlefield, no enemies. Just peace. A future built together. The light faded, but the message remained in his chest like a second heartbeat. The cavern trembled. They didn't have more time. The soldiers had activated a charge. The entrance was about to collapse. Elias pulled Liari away from the monument. She hesitated only once before nodding. They ran to a side passage barely visible through vines of light. The chamber behind them collapsed as they slipped through. Dust and starlight swirled around them. They emerged in a narrow canyon, hidden from view. The sky above was night now, filled with real stars. The war was still out there. But so was freedom. Liari turned to Elias, brushing her fingers gently over his chest. Her lips moved, trying to form a word in his language. It came out soft and broken, but he understood. She was trying, for him, just as he had stayed. For her, asterisk. The stars above seemed closer now. Elias lay on the canyon floor, breathing hard, his hands covered in dust. Beside him, Liari crouched quietly, scanning the dark ridges with alert eyes. The echo of the explosion behind them still rumbled in the distance. They had made it out. But they weren't safe yet. Elias adjusted the strap of his rifle. Every part of him ached. He had gone days without real rest. His body wanted to collapse. But Liari remained upright, strong, guiding him forward. With silent gestures, she was not just surviving. She was leading. The canyon led into a valley hidden from sky scanners. Alien vines curled across jagged rock, and glowing insects drifted lazily through the air. Liari picked a small fruit from a branch and handed it to Elias. He took it with a thankful nod and bit into it. Sweetness and energy returned to his limbs. They found shelter in the curve of a rock wall where water trickled down into a shallow pool. Liari knelt to wash her hands. Elias sat beside her, watching the water ripple. He could see her reflection beside his. Two faces that did not belong together, yet somehow did. Liari pulled out another memory crystal from her pouch. This one smaller, dimmer. She pressed it to her forehead, then held it out to him. Elias hesitated. The last one had shaken him to his core, but he trusted her. He took the crystal and held it to his head. This vision was different, softer, quieter. He saw Liari's thoughts. Not just her memories, her emotions, her longing to be understood, her frustration at having no voice that could cross the gap between worlds, her loneliness before she met him. He saw how much it mattered when he stayed behind, how much her heart clung to that single act. He had become more than a soldier to her. He had become her bridge, her chance to dream differently. When the vision faded, Elias looked at her. She was already looking at him. The air between them was warm. Not from heat, from understanding. He reached out and placed the crystal gently back in her hand. She closed her fingers around it with care. The moment was interrupted by a soft mechanical beep. Elias's wrist communicator had picked up a signal. A coded message, human. It was from orbit. A new drop team was coming in, not scavengers, official units. He and Liari would be spotted if they stayed. He showed her the blinking light. She nodded. She understood it was a warning. She rose to her feet and helped him stand. The next part of their journey would not be quiet, but it could still be chosen together. They climbed higher into the hills. The stars began to fade as dawn approached. A soft purple glow touched the horizon. Liari paused to look back at the valley. She raised her hand and signed something in her people's gesture language. Elias didn't know the meaning, but he felt it. A goodbye, a promise, a memory marked forever. They continued walking as the light grew brighter, not speaking, not needing to. Each step forward was a word between them, a word in the language they had started building without sound. Asterisk. A new morning burned across the ruined landscape as the sun climbed behind the distant mountains. The world looked quieter now, but Elias knew it was only the surface. War didn't disappear with the rising light. It only waited. He and Liari had traveled far beyond the battlefield. Their bodies were tired, their clothes torn, but their will was stronger than ever. Each step had brought them closer to something neither of them could explain. Not safety, not escape. Something deeper. They reached the edge of an old transport platform, long abandoned. Vines had overtaken the steel. Broken cargo crates lay scattered across the ground. Elias stepped onto the rusted surface and tapped the control panel. Nothing responded. No power remained. Liari knelt and pressed her hand to a small pillar beside the platform. Her fingers glowed faintly, and the metal responded with a hum. Hidden power stirred. Ancient systems flickered back to life. The platform's lights returned like tired stars. Elias looked at her with quiet awe. Again and again, she surprised him. She did not speak with pride. She simply stood and nodded for him to continue. He did. Together, they stepped onto the center ring of the platform as it began to rise. The view widened as the lift ascended. Broken towers, cratered roads. Small fires still burned in distant corners. A planet gasping for peace. Elias reached out and gently took Liari's hand. She did not pull away. Her fingers curled softly around his. A transport beacon flashed overhead. A signal. Human command had picked up the platform's activation. They would send a ship soon. The message came through clearly. Elias read it aloud, not for her to understand, but to steady himself. Survivor detected. Preparing extraction. 8 of 15 minutes. Liari looked at the sky. Her eyes shimmered. She knew what the signal meant. Return, rescue, but also risk. If he left, he might never return. If she stayed, she might never be safe again. And yet, neither of them stepped away. The lift reached its peak and stopped. Wind rushed around them. Above, the human ship pierced the clouds, growing closer. Elias turned to her. He pulled off his helmet and placed it in her hands. She looked at it, confused at first, then understood. He would not leave her behind. He raised his hand and turned off the beacon. A single press. The signal died. The ship paused above, waiting. Then it turned. It didn't land. It vanished into the sky again. Silence returned. The wind softened. Liari stared at him, eyes wide. Then, slowly she stepped forward and pressed her forehead to his. No words, no sound. Only closeness. Only the truth that passed between two souls who had chosen each other. They stood there as the sun rose higher. Their future uncertain. Their world still broken. But between them, something new had begun. Weeks passed since Elias turned off the beacon. The war above had cooled, not ended. Human ships still circled the skies. Patrols still combed the surface. But the valley Elias and Liari had chosen remained hidden, protected by the same ancient roots that once guarded her people's secrets. A quiet grove, under violet trees that whispered in the wind, Elias sat beside a smooth stone marked with glowing symbols. He had learned a few of them, enough to read their meanings, enough to speak a little with his hands. He was learning her. Language, slowly, patiently. Every gesture carried weight. Liari arrived with water drawn from the nearby spring. She placed the carved bowl between them and sat, folding her legs with ease. She watched him trace another symbol in the soil with his finger. She smiled, correcting his line with her own. He laughed quietly, shaking his head. She reached for his hand and guided it. Their lessons weren't only in words. They were in music too. She had taught him how to hum the tones of her people's old songs. He had taught her how to tap rhythm into stone with a stick. Together, they created patterns. A new kind of conversation that danced between sound and silence. At night, they lay beneath the open sky. She would point to stars and share their names with soft movements of her fingers. He would repeat them slowly, sometimes wrong. Sometimes close. But every time she listened like it was poetry. Elias began to dream differently, not of war. Not of Earth, but of her world, her skies, her touch, her language. The dreams came gently, filled with color and motion. And in those dreams, he spoke fluently. He spoke not only with words, but with understanding. One day, while walking through the narrow canyon trail, they stumbled upon a group of survivors. Xantharians, aged, tired, hiding. When they saw Liari, they froze in disbelief. Then they bowed. They knew her. They had waited for her. They had not known she had lived. Elias stepped back as she embraced them. Tears marked her cheeks. When she turned to him, her eyes glowed with something deeper than joy. Purpose. She led him to them and signed his name with careful fingers. Then she placed his hand in theirs. He had become part of her world. Not just beside her, within it. They accepted him. Not as an outsider. As one of them. Seasons changed. The skies calmed. Human forces withdrew from the surface. The war was over. Or at least far away now. But Elias never left. He stayed where he was understood without needing to speak. He stayed because he no longer dreamed in English. He dreamed in the light of her eyes, in the brush of her hands, in the quiet spaces where her voice could be heard without sound, and when the first child born after the war reached out with both hands and spoke his name in the blended sign of two worlds, Elias knew something had been rebuilt that no weapon could destroy. A language not made of grammar or sound, but of trust, of memory, of love.